Hello again and welcome back to our course on PSE 15. It's time now to start to look at the PSE 15 editor. I'm going to start it from the welcome screen. You can, of course, as you know, start it from the organizer. You may already have used the editor, of course, but I'm going to assume for the purposes of this section that you're completely new to it. Once the Editor Workspace is open, you'll see that there are some features that are clearly common with the organizer and some of them that are quite different. Let's look at some of the main features now. The other ones we'll see as we go through the next few sections. We have a menu system in the top left. It has more menu options than the organizer has, but works on the same principle. And the top right on this Windows 10 device, I have standard Windows buttons for minimize, restore, etc. I can also close the Editor Workspace using the standard close button. In fact, if I click on the File menu, there is an exit option there. In the middle I have eLive, which works on the same principle that it does in the organizer. And then I have three options for the three available editing modes. There's Quick Edit, which, as the name implies, gives me a way of quickly editing a document. It's a bit like Instant Fix, but as you'll see later on, it's not quite the same. Guided editing, and guided editing gives us facilities to edit images to achieve specific effects, but with guiding, with help, with a sort of recipe to follow. And then finally, the most powerful option, that is expert editing. And in expert editing mode, you have a full set of tools available for dealing with any kind of issue, enhancement, problem that you might have in an image. And we'll be looking at expert editing quite a bit in later sections. On the left in expert editing, you can see a toolbox. And each of those icons on the left represents a tool or an option available in expert editing. If I switch back to quick editing, I still have a toolbox on the left, but it has a much reduced set of tools. So just sticking with quick edit mode for the moment, look over on the right. We have a panel here called adjustments. And in fact, if you look at the buttons at the bottom, you can see that you can turn off panels and turn on panels. So you have an effects panel, a textures panel, a frames panel. Now at the other end of the bar containing those buttons, you have buttons which look a little bit like the ones that you have in the organizer. So you have an option here to quickly switch into the organizer, and you have undo, redo and rotate buttons. But you also have a couple of different ones, tool options and photo bin. The photo bin is the area here, a sort of smaller window below the main window, and if I click on photo bin I can hide and show it. So that's the basics of the Editor Workspace. Let's start to look at the editor in more detail next. One of the first things I'd like you to do is to click on the Help menu and work your way through the help options. Many of them link through to the same help pages or pages on the Adobe website that the equivalents in the organizer help do. But for example, if you go to video tutorials, that takes you to Photoshop Elements help, and the links here relate to Photoshop Elements rather than Elements Organizer. And if you take, for example, this option, Photoshop Elements Workspace and Environment, there's a whole list of topics there, many of which overlap what we're covering in this section and the next few sections. So I do suggest that you follow those links and take a look at those as well. One of the most noticeable things at the moment is that if I click on the Enhance menu, every option is greyed out. The reason being that I have no image open at the moment. And as you'll see a little bit later on in the course, one option I have is to open an image using this Open button on the left. But particularly if you're using the organizer, you'll very often access the images you want to work on from the organizer. So if I go down to the photo bin and click on that drop down, note the options. Show open files. Well, I don't have any open files at the moment. I haven't opened anything. Show files selected in organizer and Stanley BS9472. And of course Stanley BS9472 is the album that I created earlier in the course. Let's use this middle option, show files selected in organizer. What I'm going to do is to switch back to the organizer. The organizer for me is already open, so if I just click on organizer here, it takes me back to the organizer. Let me select one of my images. I'm going to select that one. Now let me switch back to the editor. And now you can see that image open in the editor. Once it's open in the editor, of course, if I click on the Enhance menu, every option is now available to me. Now let's just return to that little drop down on the left there. The picture of a bird that you can see is an open file. So Show Open Files shows that one image, the one that I've got open in the editor. If I choose the second option now, Show Files Selected in Organizer, it's the same picture because that's the one I've got selected in the organizer as well. And if I click on Stanley BS9472, I'll see all of the images that are in that album. None of them are currently open in the editor, but if I clicked on that one, for example, it would open in the editor, and that's now available for me to do work on in the editor. Let me go back here to Show Open Files, and I've now got two images, or should I say two thumbnails, in my photo bin, and these are the two photos that I've got open in the editor. So that's one of the key ways of controlling what you're working on in the editor. If at any time I want to close one of the images that's in my photo bin, all I need to do is to go up to File, Close. If I've made any changes, I'd want to decide about whether I want to save those changes, but I haven't made any changes here, so it just closes without any questions being asked. And something else that I'm sure you won't be surprised by is the fact that there are contextual menus. So if I wanted to close the picture of the bird there, if I right click on the thumbnail in the photo bin, one of the options on the contextual menu is Close. So I now have no open files. Let's go back to Show Files Selected in Organizer, click on that one again. It's now open in the editor for me to work on. If I'm working on an image in the editor, there's a little view control up towards the top left. It currently says After Only, but I can show before and after in a horizontal arrangement. Now, I haven't made any changes to this picture at the moment, so those two are exactly the same. But let's suppose that I wanted to do some work on this image, and that what I'm going to do involves cropping the image. I'm currently in quick edit mode. I have a reduced tool set, but one of the tools is this one, which is the crop tool. Click on crop. What you can see at the bottom now are the crop tool options. And as I mentioned earlier on, you can switch the options off or on. I get one of these crop boxes by default, and let's suppose that I decide to crop this particular image exactly according to the default crop box that's come up. So I'm just going to click on the tick. I've now cropped that image, and you can see before and after horizontal, and that lets me see exactly what the effect of my cropping has had on the image. And don't forget, as I pointed out earlier on, I've of course got an undo button. And let me just close the tool options. Let me switch back on the photo bin. Let me click on close to close the image. I've made some changes, or at least as far as PSE is concerned, I may have done. Do I want to save the changes? No, I don't. For most people working in PSE, they do tend to use both the organizer and the editor. As I pointed out earlier, some people use one and not the other. But if you're using both, there's a sort of potential conflict if you work on an image in both. Let me just select the bird picture again in the photo bin. And as far as PSE is concerned, I'm working on that image. If I switch back into the organizer now, in the organizer you can see that it's marked as Edit in Progress. and there's a padlock there just saying basically this is being worked on in the editor. So that's a means of helping to protect you about making changes in two different places. For people who use both the organizer and the editor, what generally tends to happen is that, particularly if they're doing quite a lot of work, they have both programs open at once and switch freely between the two of them. So this sort of feature is very helpful. Let me just go back into the editor one more time in this section. One other thing I need to point out here is that with the three different editing modes, quick, guided and expert, there are quite a few differences in the workspace, apart from, for example, the number of tools available in the toolbox. And I'm going to cover these as we go along. Let me just give you an example of something else. I've shown you the photo bin there. I've got one picture open. Let me open a couple of other pictures. Let me go back to my album and let's just say I'm going to open that one and that one. Click on Show Open Files. I can select which of those I want to work on at any time by clicking on the thumbnail in the photo bin. But if I were in expert mode, I get tabs along the top of the main window, which also enable me to switch between my open images. And the tabs contain information about each image, the name, the size, the zoom level, and so on. So be aware that as you learn more and more about these three ways of working in the PSE editor, you'll encounter other additional features of the workspace as well. But in this section I've covered the main features of the workspace, and in the next section we're going to take a look at preferences. So please join me for that.